Welcome to Paskvan Podcasts. Please like, subscribe, and comment. It really helps this channel.
Okay, so let's get into this. The story we're exploring today. It sounds less like something from a history book and a lot more like a classified script from a movie.
It really does.
It's the true and deeply unsettling account of a thermonuclear weapon that, well, it just vanished right off the coast of America.
And against all odds, it's never been definitively found. It's an artifact from a different time, a piece of Cold War hardware that just slipped under the waves and stayed there.
It's a perfect storm, isn't it? You've got this catastrophic system failure colliding with the constant edge-of-your-seat tension of the Cold War.
Absolutely. We're talking about 1958. And the mindset then, the military mandate, it wasn't about caution. It was readiness at all costs.
A mentality that led to risks that, if you look at them through a modern lens, they seem genuinely unbelievable.
Oh, completely. The rule was simple. You train exactly as you would fight. And in 1958, that often meant flying with a fully operational weapon. So our goal here today is to really dig into the reports, the accounts surrounding this event. The military has a name for this kind of thing, a broken arrow.
Right. And for anyone who doesn't know, that's the official term for an accident involving a nuclear weapon. It could be, loss, theft, and accidental firing.
But, and this is a crucial distinction, it doesn't mean there's a risk of an immediate nuclear exchange.
Exactly. And this specific incident, the one we're focusing on, is the loss of the Tybee weapon just off the coast of Georgia.
And we need to figure out not just how this bomb disappeared, but why the answer to the most important question, what was actually in it, remains so hard to pin down.
Even after decades. Decades of official searches, private investigations, and just layers of secrecy, the story is defined by ambiguity. And the deeper you look, the more contradictions you find.
So let's set the stage. Because the Cold War context isn't just a footnote here. It's the reason this all happened.
It's the catalyst.
In the winter of 1958, this threat wasn't some abstract idea. It was real. It was immediate. It was everywhere.
The U.S. and the Soviet Union were locked in this silent, high-stakes standoff. Each side was genuinely convinced that the other was just moments away from launching a first strike.
And that atmosphere, that intense pressure, it dictated everything about how the military operated.
The Strategic Air Command, SAC, they were on perpetual alert. I mean, bombers were constantly in the air, ready to go at a moment's notice. Training missions were pushed to the absolute limit.
So nuclear weapons were being moved, loaded, and handled with a frequency that, it would just shock a modern military observer.
It would. The philosophy was crystal clear. Preparedness was more important than almost anything else. And that meant taking huge risks, even over your own country.
And that huge risk became a reality on the night of February 5th, 1958. High above Georgia, dark, clear night.
Yeah. The aircraft at the heart of this story is the B-47 Stratojet. You have to understand, this was the absolute cornerstone of America's nuclear deterrent.
A monster of a machine.
A huge aircraft, 6 engines, swept-back wings, designed for one thing, flying deep into the Soviet Union at high speed and delivering a nuclear payload. It was sleek, it was fast, and it was unforgiving.
The pilots flying these things were the best of the best.
Cream of the crop. Highly experienced, trusted with an almost unimaginable level of responsibility.
But the critical point here, the thing that defines the entire story, is what that B-47 was carrying that night. This was not a training dummy filled with concrete.
No, this was a Mark 15 hydrogen bomb. And we really need to pause and think about the scale of this payload. This wasn't some small tactical device.
This was a city ender, a strategic weapon.
The Mark 15 was one of the most powerful thermonuclear weapons the U.S. had at the time. The specs are they're staggering. It weighed more than 7,500 pounds.
Wow.
And when it was fully armed, it was designed to deliver a blast measured in megatons. Test data shows variance yielding between 3 and 4 megatons.
The records themselves are chilling. They state it was, quote, real, fully intact, fully dangerous.
And even if you take the nuclear part out of the equation for a second, just its sheer mass and the conventional explosives inside made it an extreme hazard on its own.
So the mission itself was pretty standard for SAC, right? A simulated combat run.
Completely routine.
Yeah.
Designed to test the crew's ability to carry out a strike under pressure. Major Howard Richardson, the aircraft commander, was a veteran pilot, thousands of hours under his belt.
And the training, as you said, was designed to be as realistic as possible.
And that realism meant an interceptor. In this case, an F-86 Sabre jet flown by Lieutenant Clarence Stewart.
So the F-86's job was to play the part of an enemy attacker.
Right. to test the bomber crew's evasive maneuvers, all of this happening at around 36,000 feet in the pitch black with very high closure speeds.
And right there at that altitude, the training mission instantly becomes a real-world catastrophe.
The F-86 misjudged its approach. You're talking about a split-second failure of depth perception, of calculating speed in the dark, a fraction of a second where judgment failed.
And the result was immediate.
The fighter slammed directly into the B-47. The impact was incredibly powerful. It ripped through the bomber's fuselage, tore off metal, damaged the controls.
And critically ruptured fuel lines.
Part of the bomber's wing structure was just gone. The B-47 immediately became unstable. Violently unstable.
And inside the cockpit must have been absolute chaos.
A total sensory overload. Alarms screaming, instruments failing, the air filling up with smoke and the smell of fuel.
Fighter pilot Stewart, he managed to get out.
Yes, he ejected successfully and parachuted down. That's maybe the one small piece of good luck in this whole story.
But for Major Richardson and his crew, they were left fighting this massive crippled aircraft that was rapidly dying and carrying a hydrogen bomb. The crisis in the air had just begun.
Richardson, in the immediate aftermath of that collision, he's facing just a cascade of failures. One engine is confirmed gone. Another is failing under the strain.
And the weight of the aircraft, especially that 7,500-pound bomb, must have made it almost impossible to control.
Nearly impossible. Every minute that passed, the plane was getting weaker, less stable. A controlled landing was looking less and less likely.
So let's just stop and think about the position he's in. He's flying this heavy, unstable bomber over populated parts of Georgia. He's heading towards the coast, towards Savannah.
Right. And if he tries to limp all the way to a big base, like Hunter Air Force Base, the chances of a crash on approach are incredibly high.
And that's the core of the decision he has to make. A crash with the Mark 15 still on board. Even if it couldn't go nuclear, it carried this other catastrophic risk.
The conventional explosives inside it.
Exactly.
That bomb had about 400 pounds of conventional high explosives packed inside, designed to compress the nuclear core. If that detonated on impact...
It wouldn't be a firecracker.
No, you're talking about a blast on the scale of a major industrial disaster, a massive conventional ordnance event.
And a blast like that, it could devastate a huge area. Widespread destruction, fires, mass casualties in a populated area like Savannah.
So Richardson isn't just risking his crew at this point. He's risking thousands of American lives on the ground below, all because of a training error.
It's a true no-win scenario.
Absolutely. The choice was stark: save the crew and prevent a disaster on the ground, or hold on to the bomb and risk everything. The only viable option, the one that reduced the greatest potential for harm, was to jettison the weapon.
To drop it in the Atlantic Ocean, far away from the coast.
Far away from anyone.
What do the records say about getting the green light for that? Was there a long debate?
No, not at all. The records are clear that the authorization came almost instantly. Richardson got on the radio, explained how unstable the B-47 was, the danger it posed.
There was no time for a committee meeting?
Zero time. The threat to Savannah was too immediate, too real. The wartime protocol for split-second decisions, it worked. It functioned to prevent a civilian disaster.
So around 2 a.m, over the dark, quiet waters near Tybee Island, just east of Savannah, Major Richardson lets it go.
And the Mark 15, this device built to erase the city, just falls silently into the ocean.
What's so chilling is the lack of an event. No flash, no explosion, no sound that anyone on the coast heard.
Just 7,600 pounds of the most dangerous hardware on Earth disappearing into the black water.
And for the crew of the B-47, the relief must have been incredible.
Oh, immense. Once that enormous weight was gone, the plane became much more controllable, and Richardson's skill as a pilot was just heroic. He nursed that crippled bomber all the way to Hunter Air Force Base.
I landed it safely.
Against all odds, he landed it. The crew survived. The crisis in the air was over.
But the crisis itself had just shifted. It moved from the sky to the sea.
Exactly. A missing nuclear weapon wasn't just an accounting error. It was a major national security issue, a huge embarrassment, and a failure of control. The problem was now invisible, resting somewhere on the ocean floor.
And that's where the official story starts to get very, very murky.
That's where history dissolves into ambiguity.
Before we get to the search, we have to talk about the weapon itself, because this is where the whole mystery really begins. The Mark 15. What was inside it?
Okay, so it was a two-stage thermonuclear device. The first stage, the primary, uses those conventional high explosives we talked about to crush a nuclear core, a trigger.
That starts a fission reaction.
Right. a small nuclear event. That initial powerful fission explosion then provides the energy to ignite the second stage, which is the fusion fuel. And that's where you get the massive multi-megaton blast.
And you mentioned the conventional danger. That didn't just vanish when it hit the water.
Not at all. And that's a point people often miss. No matter what was going on with the nuclear parts, you still had roughly 400 pounds of very powerful, very precisely engineered conventional explosives in there.
And if those went off, say from the impact or just from degrading over time,
you'd still have a huge localized blast. I mean, 400 pounds of high explosive is way more powerful than a standard artillery shell. It would destroy everything in a very wide radius. That hazard was real, and it's permanent.
So the central question that dictates all the long-term risk is, could it have produced a nuclear explosion?
That's the billion-dollar question. And military officials in 1958 moved very, very quickly to control that narrative. They assured the public the bomb was unarmed, that it posed no nuclear danger.
And their whole argument rested on this idea of the nuclear capsule.
Exactly. In a lot of bombs from that era, the final trigger, usually a plutonium core needed to start the whole fission process, was often transported and installed separately.
For safety.
For safety, yes.
Yeah.
So the official line was that the Tybee weapon was missing this crucial removable capsule. And without it, a nuclear yield was, by definition, impossible.
And for a public that was conditioned to trust the authorities during the Cold War, that explanation was enough. It calmed the immediate fears.
It did. But that story didn't hold up forever.
Years later, it starts to fall apart.
Decades later, retired military personnel started coming forward with very different stories, conflicting accounts about that night, about the procedures they used back then.
And it all comes back to that push for realism in training.
It does. The mindset was, why would you fly a practice mission with an incomplete weapon? The whole point was to be ready for actual combat at a moment's notice.
So some of these retired personnel, people connected to SAC operations, they suggested it wasn't just common to fly with complete weapons.
They said it was often mandatory, that for these long-range missions, crews were expected to carry fully live, complete nuclear weapons.
So now you have two completely opposing stories.
Yeah.
The official documents from '58 say it was unarmed, but you have testimony from the airmen who were there saying the Tybee bomb might have been a complete weapon, nuclear capsule and all.
And that changes everything. It's a total shift in the risk assessment. If that bomb had its full nuclear core, the potential consequences for that entire region are catastrophic.
Even if an accidental nuclear event is unlikely.
It's extremely unlikely without the precise arming sequences. But the possibility, however remote, means that a megaton-class weapon was sitting just off the coast of a major American city. The math is simple. Unlikely isn't the same as impossible.
And if that worst-case scenario had happened, a detonation there, what are we talking about?
You're talking about a fireball miles wide. Thermal radiation starting fires deep inland, a shock wave that would flatten huge parts of Savannah, Hilton Head, all the surrounding towns.
The entire coastline, the wetlands,
Yeah.
it would all be contaminated.
Rendered uninhabitable for generations. It's an apocalyptic scenario.
And even if you put that aside, the conventional danger, that got worse over time, right? With the corrosion from the salt water.
Saltwater is relentless. Over more than 60 years, that steel casing is going to degrade. So the long-term risk becomes, does that corrosion allow water to get inside? Does it cause chemical changes that could make those 400 pounds of conventional explosives unstable?
At what point does the shell fail and trigger a high explosive event?
Exactly. And then you have the radiation fears, which never went away. If the nuclear material was in there, even if it was sealed, a slow leak through a corroded casing could contaminate the sediment, the marine life.
And later on, surveys did find slightly elevated radiation levels in the area.
They did. And this is where the ambiguity becomes a weapon in itself. Officials correctly point out that coastal areas have natural background radiation. Certain minerals in the sand and sediment can give off readings.
So a detector can tell you there's radiation, but not necessarily where it's coming from.
Not without very specific analysis. They're looking for the isotopic fingerprint of bomb-grade material, like plutonium-239, not the signature of naturally decaying thorium. And the seabed there is naturally very noisy, radiologically speaking.
What's so telling is how the official story was managed over the years. It didn't change because new evidence was found.
No, it changed because old secrets started to leak out. Because former officials finally felt they could speak up and cast doubt on those original assurances from 1958.
So the narrative was shaped by institutional priorities.
Protect public confidence. Minimize the embarrassment of a major failure. The enduring fact is this. There is no definitive public proof that settles the debate over that nuclear capsule. All we have are official statements, missing evidence, and conflicting stories.
Once Major Richardson landed that B-47, the mission changed completely. It became an emergency search and recovery operation.
An absolute top priority. But the urgency wasn't just about the potential danger of the weapon itself. It was pure Cold War geopolitics.
They couldn't afford the embarrassment?
Couldn't afford the embarrassment of losing a hydrogen bomb in their own backyard. And worse, they couldn't risk the Soviets finding it first. Imagine a Soviet sub secretly recovering an advanced American H-bomb.
The intelligence coup would be massive.
Unthinkable. So the recovery effort was frantic. They threw everything at it. Navy ships, specialized aircraft, divers. They had the drop coordinates from Richardson, so they had a search area near Tybee Island.
But the environment itself is their biggest enemy.
The ocean floor there is a nightmare for a search mission. It's not a flat, hard surface. It's all shifting sand, thick, silty mud, and heavy sediment that gets churned up by strong currents.
So a 7,600-pound object isn't just going to sit on the bottom.
No, it's going to sink. It would have hit that soft silt and just buried itself, like an anchor in wet clay. And once it's buried, it's incredibly hard for sonar to get a clear return signal.
So the few anomalies they did find on sonar.
They couldn't tell if it was the bomb or a rock or some old shipwreck debris. It was impossible to distinguish.
What about the divers? Couldn't they just go down and look?
Visibility was practically zero. They were literally searching by feel, groping around in the cold, murky darkness. It's incredibly slow, dangerous work.
And the shifting sands meant an area they cleared one day could be covered again the next.
Exactly. They spent weeks on this massive, intensive search, and they found nothing. Absolutely nothing conclusive. The ocean just wouldn't give it up.
And then comes the moment that really defines this whole story. In April 1958, just 2 months after the incident, the search is called off.
Abruptly terminated. The Air Force issues a statement declaring the bomb irretrievably lost.
And that phrase is, it's doing a lot of work there.
It's a political phrase, not a technical one. It doesn't mean they knew where it was and couldn't get it. It was a cold calculation. It meant the cost, the difficulty, and the bad press were no longer worth the effort.
It was easier to just let it become a ghost story.
It was politically easier to quietly accept a missing weapon than to keep funding a very public, very expensive failure that highlighted the limits of American technology.
And that abrupt ending immediately created suspicion that's lasted ever since.
Of course. Why would the most powerful military in the world just stop looking for a hydrogen bomb?
It suggested one of two things to people. Either they really were incapable of finding it, or
they did find it and covered up the recovery.
And once the military packed up and went home, the story of the Mark 15 changed completely. It wasn't an accident report anymore. It became local folklore.
A ghost story with a nuclear heartbeat.
Right. You'd hear stories from the fishing community. Fishermen whose nets would snag on something impossibly heavy, something that would drag their boat before the nets finally tore loose. Stories you could never verify, but they kept the legend alive.
They kept that very specific, localized fear alive. The feeling that something big and dangerous was still down there, resting just beneath the surface of their everyday lives.
And for decades, that's pretty much what it was, a local rumor, until one man decided to bring it back into the national spotlight.
A retired Air Force lieutenant colonel named Derek Duke.
What was his motivation? Why pick up this old cold case?
He was driven by that lack of closure. He believed the technology they had in 1958 was just not up to the task. So he started his own methodical, privately funded search.
Using modern tools.
State-of-the-art stuff. High-sensitivity magnetometers, better hydrographic data, precise radiation detectors, things the Navy in the 50s could only dream of.
And his work was crucial because it forced the conversation back into the realm of data.
And his findings, specifically his claims of finding elevated radiation levels in certain spots, that was like pouring gasoline on the fire.
But there's that ambiguity again. Was it radiation from a leaking bomb, proving a nuclear core was present?
Or was it, as the government quickly countered, just naturally occurring radiation from minerals in the sediment?
And for the public, it's impossible to know the difference.
It's a real scientific challenge. But the mere existence of those higher readings was enough to reignite public fear and force the government's hand.
Which led to the Air Force reinvestigating in 2004.
Which was a huge deal. The fact that they came back decades after declaring it irretrievably lost was a massive admission that this was still an unresolved, potentially dangerous issue for them.
But even after that new investigation, The official story didn't change.
Not one bit. No confirmed location, no confirmation of a nuclear core, and crucially, no evidence of dangerous radiation levels that required action.
And that lack of a clear answer just spawned more theories.
Right. The most plausible one is still Theory 1. It's just buried deep in the silt. The physics of it makes sense.
It's just too deep for the instruments to get a clear picture.
The signal gets muffled or distorted by all the mud and sand on top of it.
Then there's Theory 2, that it's moved over time.
Exactly. That currents or major storms have rolled it or reburied it somewhere else, throwing off the original search grid.
Theory 3 is that all these sonar pings and radiation spikes are just junk.
And that's entirely possible. The waters off Savannah are a graveyard of shipwrecks and industrial debris. Without physically digging it up, you can't be sure.
But the one that really captures the imagination, the real thriller theory, is Theory 4.
That the bomb was recovered in secret.
Which, if you think about it from a Cold War political perspective, makes a lot of sense.
It's completely plausible. End the public search, claim failure, let it fade into myth. Then go back quietly and get it. That way you avoid all the difficult questions about what was in it and how you lost it in the first place. A secret recovery controls the narrative forever.
Which brings us to the most frustrating part of this whole thing. The central paradox.
Yeah.
We have the technology now, why not just go find it and end this once and for all?
And the government's position is this endless loop. They reassure everyone that a nuclear event is impossible and there's no dangerous radiation.
But they won't fund a recovery.
And that's where the public trust just evaporates. If it's safe, get it out of there and give people peace of mind. If it's dangerous, why are you leaving it there?
What's their official defense for leaving it?
It's a complex risk management argument. They claim that trying to recover it could actually make the situation worse.
How so?
Well, digging it up would require massive dredging that could disturb the weapon, potentially destabilizing those conventional explosives that have been sitting dormant for decades.
Okay, I see.
And if the casing has failed and nuclear material is present, dredging could stir it all up, spreading a localized, contained hazard over a much wider area.
So their argument is that leaving it alone, buried deep in the mud, is actually the safest option.
That inaction is a form of risk reduction. But you can see how to a community living right next to it, that sounds a lot like avoidance.
It sounds like they don't want to deal with the political fallout of what they might find.
The true constraint isn't technology anymore, it's political will. Launching a major recovery mission means admitting the story isn't over. It invites global media attention and forces a public debate about classified Cold War secrets.
And containing the story is still more important than closing the book on it.
The Tybee incident. It really exposed this deep crack in the whole promise of absolute control that the military sold the public during the Cold War.
It showed the fragility of the system.
Exactly. These weren't just abstract symbols of power. They were real, physical objects, handled by people, flying over American cities, and subject to simple human error. One mistake, one collision.
And a weapon of immense destructive power just vanishes.
For the local community, this story has become part of their identity. You see that strange mix of real anxiety and dark humor, t-shirts and jokes about their missing bomb.
It's a way of coping with a permanent, low-level fear.
The anxiety today isn't about a sudden flash anymore. It's about the slow, long-term risks. The slow corrosion, the potential for a gradual leak. A risk that sits in this gray zone between improbable and impossible because we're missing the final proof.
This whole incident is a perfect snapshot of that era's mindset.
It's the classic Cold War pattern. An accident happens, the response is to minimize and classify, and the full truth only starts to trickle out decades later. It's a pattern that was guaranteed to create permanent mistrust.
The mystery only exists because of that gap between the simple public story and the complex classified reality.
That's the fertile ground where all the speculation grows. In the end, the Tybee Bomb isn't just a missing piece of hardware. It's a symbol of an age when the line between a routine training exercise and a catastrophe was razor thin.
It's a quiet reminder that even the greatest powers are never in absolute control.
And that's why the story still has such a hold on us. We're left with this permanent, unsettling question mark sitting just offshore. It's about how something so powerful can just slip beneath the surface of everyday life, and the world just keeps going.
The ultimate power of the Tybee Bomb, then, isn't its ability to detonate. It's its power to remind us that control is an illusion, that something so dangerous can become a ghost, a permanent, silent part of the landscape.
And it forces you to confront that uncertainty. So, a final thought for you to consider. If you lived on that coast, knowing the official story is full of holes, would the phrase irretrievably lost give you peace? Or would you always wonder what that silence is truly hiding?